Hi, and welcome to another tabletop tip of the day. It's been a while. I got COVID. I've had computer issues. My computer has been in pieces in my studio. I had friends come from out of town. There was other things going on. Just my starting in the spring. I just got super busy, so I got out of the habit of doing these videos, and I apologize. But I'm back, and I'm hoping I can recapture some of the interest that was happening. So, my tip of the day is don't be afraid to drop your homebrew rules, maybe even your homebrew setting, but I'm really going to be talking about rules. I've been running a game for a while, a fantasy sword and sorcery game that drifted from Stone Top to another location in the world called Lycosa, and we decided to try to make our own rule set to go along with that move. Partly because Stone Top did not capture what we wanted it to capture, which was, excuse me, really solid rules on how to build things in a community, or to build, like, I want to create a caravan, or I want to have a shipping empire, or sort of those like management, those income things that are income coming in, and investments going out kind of thing in a fantasy setting, like, and could be bigger or it could be small. Stone Top sort of promised that on the tin and didn't quite deliver it. There was nothing on the character sheets that really impacted the community except for like one playbook, which was the Marshal, and that was really only about defending the town. There wasn't like, oh, you get bonuses for, smoothing over difficulties between, feuding families or anything like that. And that's the kind of thing that we were kind of looking for. Or there's hiccups in trying to build up the inn again, because it got burned down to the ground, and what kind of complications can ensue. And Stone Top just didn't really have that there, and so I came up with a game that I called Mercenaries, Mercenaries, Merchants, and Mystics, Triple M, and it was okay. I mean, it was a 2d10 plus stat plus skill, roll under it kind of system, or a roll over a target number, excuse me. And it worked okay. I mean, we got really good fiction at the table. We got great characters. We had some fun adventures. Um, but it just, the section that I was most wanting to push was that idea of ventures, and ventures as in venture capitalism, not adventure but venture, um, and projects and things like that. And those rules just hit with a resounding thud. The players weren't invested in them. They didn't care for them. They didn't really think about them. Um, what I wanted them as a GM to sort of say, hey, it's going to take this many months or this many adventures, or you need to go on an adventure and get this for this project to come to fruition. Just It just wasn't there. It wasn't happening. And then I had two players say, you know what, we're tired of the play testing. We were also play testing a superhero game sort of concurrently at the same time, and they just weren't digging it. And then I had another character say, I just don't like the Powered by the Apocalypse kind of stuff. And Triple M was very much influenced by Powered by the Apocalypse. There was combat moves, there were social moves and stuff like that. And they called it the misery generator, because when you got that middling result, which was a success but with a complication or with a cost, they just felt like, why did I even try? Like, the complications just keep adding on top of it, and I don't really. It takes me out of the game. I don't have the verisimilitude of being in my character, because then we're kind of in a writer's room discussing like what is going to happen. And I think those are fair criticisms, not ones that I happen to share. I don't happen to share that view. I mean, I think Play by the Apocalypse is brilliant. I don't have a problem as a player or as a GM with that, but I am much more comfortable jumping out of character, discussing something in the meta, and then jumping back into character. Others are not quite, uh, don't want to do that, and fair game to them. That's totally reasonable. But losing those players took a lot of wind out of my sails, and I really took a hard look at my homebrew, and I just was like, this is not working, and I can keep banging my head against the table and try to craft it into something that will work, or I can look around for something else. And one of the complaints that a player said to, like, if you go to an established rule set, I'll come back to the table. Not in a mean way. I mean, this wasn't in a manipulative way at all. This was just him describing what he wanted out of a game, and I totally respect it. And it was a very respectful conversation. So don't think that this was like him, leveraging or manipulating me at all. But it did put the bug in my head, like maybe there is something out there that might do the job well enough, and also something that takes us away from Play by the Apocalypse and back towards more traditional gaming. I have run, Savage Worlds, I've run GURPS, I've run Hero, Fantasy Hero, I've run Champions. I've run D&D. So I looked around, and on my hard drive was Conan 2D20 from Modifius Press, which I had bought a while back in a humble bundle, just PDFs. And I took a closer look at it. And now the bottom line is, this is a great system for sword and sorcery. Absolutely bonkers, beautiful, wonderful, a little complicated, but the complications are there for a reason. They're nuanced reasons, and they're there. And it's buried under a really badly organized rule book. You have to really like read and hunt for rules and stuff like that, and it's they use weird terminology to mean the same things at times, and like you've got stress, which is the damage that your character takes, and they would use that in a sentence, but then they would also say, oh, you took vigor damage or you took resolve damage, which are two different types of stress, right? One is your resolve is your mental capacity, your morale, etc., your sort of frame of mind. And then there's vigor, which is like, how tired are you getting, and did you take a bruise when that guy swung at you and hit, against your shield or whatever, blah blah blah. So yeah, just a lot of strange terminology choices, and a really disorganized rules mess. And however, we've had a phenomenally great time with Conan 2D20. Highly recommend it. It is going to be a learning curve. It is going to take a while to master it, especially since it was married with the plugin from Foundry VTT. We do Our game is virtually. We're all scattered across the country, um, and the choices that the Foundry plugin made take a little bit of getting used to as well. So you need to master that as well as master the game system. So you need to buy in. The players need to buy in. The GM needs to buy in. It's going to take some work, but once it's working, you get really great cinematic combats and really a decent system to play with. Now there were some hiccups, and there was hiccups that were of my devising, and I was aware of them going in, and vaguely, and I knew that they were going to be there, and so I want to talk about those, because here's sort of the cost of dropping a system in mid story and going with another game system. We kept the same characters. We rebuilt them in Conan. Things changed a little bit. The gist of the characters stayed there. I mean, the core of the characters are very well realized, because Conan does sort of a life path system, and it worked, and so did Triple M. I had sort of a very similar concept to that, and there was also some real similarities. In my game, I had sort of income and status, and income was what you were getting passively from your day job or whatever businesses you might own. Like the sorcerer had a little trinket shop that he would sell curios for, and so what income he got from that was then, sort of compared to his status, and what was he trying to live up to, right? The more status you have, the more expensive your sort of monthly or between adventure income was going to be. Conan has the same exact thing. They call it upkeep and they call it standing. It's exactly the same thing. The mechanic is different, but it's the same concept. Loved it. Great. Works wonderful. It's a great goad to get your adventuring characters to get back to adventuring when they start to run out of gold and realize, oh crap, I'm not going to make my monthly rent here or whatever it is. Except our characters have been so successful that they're sitting on a tremendous amount of gold, but that's a different story. Um, the other issue that I had is that this is the fifth system, I think, that I have started for this campaign world. Now, the campaign world started with a Ironsworn campaign that was set up in Iceland, Greenland, kind of analog, right? So, but it's way off the beaten track of anything else. The second campaign was Eversink, which was completely contained in the city of Eversink for Swords of the Serpentine. Swords of the Serpentine is another sword and sorcery game. Highly recommend it. Eversink is one of the best settings I've seen for sword and sorcery ever. Awesome setting. Great. We played the heck out of it. And that was in a face to face game, different players. But I wanted to kind of pull things from it. And then when we got into Stone Top, which ran for 35 episodes or so, Stone Top is set out in the frontier. It's very isolated. So again, when we went from a setting to another setting and the system change, this didn't feel weird or all that you know breaking in terms of verisimilitude. Uh, then when Stone Top ended, we got into doing the Triple M game, which was my homebrew, and we moved it to the city called Lycosa, which is sort of this port city where the adventures are happening. But this time, when we dropped Triple M, and picked up Conan 2D20, uh, we kept the same characters, we kept the same setting, the same place, and so there was some hiccups, and let me get to those. And one of them was um, our characters in Triple M felt a little bit more grounded, a little less heroic. In Conan, because there's minions, all of a sudden our salvage diver, who kind of is run with a rough crowd and has some okay combat sort of capabilities, was able to hold her own against five opponents, as is perfect for a Conan game. Um, that felt a little bit weird. Like all of a sudden she was upgraded a little bit higher than we were expecting, and so we have to kind of come to terms with that, not in any kind of game mechanic way, but in just sort of like what is our view of the world and is our view of the players and their place in the world, right? The other issue that I had was that 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 evolved, especially from the Ironsworn and the Stone Top game, which had a lot of very similar sort of ideas percolating around in the background, like sort of a first race. So in Ironsworn, they're called the first ones, and I think I might actually introduce that. That might not be canon. And then in Stone Top, it was the Maker. So I just made them the same thing, just different names for the same thing in the same world, even though they're 3,000, 4,000 miles apart from each other. And there also evolved a sort of unified theory of magic, which is, magic in the setting comes in three kind of flavors. There's divine magic, there's natural magic, spirits of nature granting you access and abilities, etc. And then there's sorcery, which is calling upon extra dimensional things, demons, extra planar kind of energies, and that is just simply is not in Conan. Conan is sorcery is freaking evil. You have to sacrifice people to be able to do stuff anywhere near uh, big, and it's a bad business. And so our character Zaidi, who is a sorcerer in Triple M, wouldn't translate to Conan, and that was the player who actually dropped out of the game for a little bit, partly because of what he said, and also for real life things that were going on. His work got very busy, and so he's stepping away for a bit. So it wasn't that much of an issue. We can just say Zaidi's off stage left, and not worry about it. And I did come up recently, just this week, with some house rules that would allow for me to kind of continue to explore that divine versus nature versus sorcery kind of tripartite mystic, system for everything. So I know how to do it now. I figured it out, and I think I've drifted the system, as they say. So if that player Zaidi's player comes back and wants to run Zaidi, I know how I'm going to do him now, and we're just going to sort of toss the sorcery ideas of Conan itself um, to the side. I mean, they're great for villains. I have no problem with that. But I also wanted a little bit more of a nuanced magic system in place, and so that was an issue of here we are changing systems in mid adventure, not mid adventure, but in mid setting, and so that was one of the things that happened that I had to be aware of. But you know, dropping the homebrew, it was a bit of a hit to my ego, to be honest, but I think it was the right thing to do. I had players who weren't happy. I wasn't happy with the system. I was getting frustrated with the system. I was having trouble running things because when I was running things, half the time I was thinking about, is this working in the system? And oh, what is my next move as a GM in the fiction? And I ran, I think, okay, but not not great. And since I've moved to Conan, I've been running much better, more intense adventures. I think I've been very happy with them. So the other thing I wanted to say about a big plus for Conan um, is it does have that plugin for the Foundry VTD, just to reiterate that. But it also has, excuse me, a really decent character generator online that Modifius has up on their website that will allow you to make, like I sat down with a new player who might be coming in. We were able to make a complex character in 45 minutes. And a lot of that was discussion and choice. That wasn't like, now I can make a character on an online generator in about 10 minutes. And you can actually just hit random if you want, and it'll make one for you in seconds. And you can play that. Um, you know, some things you have to drop aside, like I don't have, because I'm not set in Hyboria, I don't have the Hyborian languages. So those are things that you can kind of ignore, and you got to kind of sort of grab the Hyborian culture that best fits the character in this setting that we're running with right now. But these are small little file the serial number things off that don't bother me at all. And might bother you, and I understand that if it does. But I am been really happy with Conan 2D20. I'm really happy I dropped my homebrew. Okay, I'm recording this after I recorded the main part, but one of the things I wanted to come back to was that because we had been playing in Lygosa for a bit, when we discussed if we were going to play in Hyboria or not, we decided as a table that we liked what had gone on before. We liked what we had built before, and so we were going to try to graft the Conan system, but not the Conan system setting of Hyboria onto Lygosa. We could have shoehorned Lygosa in somewhere in Robert E. Howard's world, but we just didn't feel like it was necessary, and we felt like going in the other direction, so we did. Have been doing a homebrew and it hasn't worked, consider looking around for something else that might work. And there's a conversation to be had with your table of what people want from a game system. I mean, what was important to me was there would be really good cinematic combat, there would be a decent skill list, that death is on the table but rare, and it enforced that sword and sorcery vibe. D&D, you can run it sword and sorcery kind of, but certain classes and certainly certain races will break out of that sword and sorcery mold and instantly put it in high fantasy. um, my definition of high fantasy is probably, you know elves and magic being more common, and plus one swords everywhere and stuff like that. I I think high fantasy is fun. I like it, but my love growing up, I read Conan, I read Elric, I read Corum, I read Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, I read Ericos, I read Tarzan, I read Zorro, I read the Three Musketeers. That's where my love of fantasy lies, in that sort of very humanocentric, very adventurous centric kind of game. And our game happens to have a lot of politics on top of the adventure stuff, so it's a complex game. Um, yeah, if you're interested in sort of learning more about my game, you can. I have a Scabbard account. Would be happy to link it into the comments if you want to click on that and peruse around. Anyways, so that's it. A bit long-winded today. I apologize. My gaming tip of the day is don't be afraid to change systems. All right, talk to you later, and until next time, keep on keeping on.